filmmaking technology was invented in the late 19th century, but the cinema experience as we know it started with the opening of picture houses between 1907 and the First World War. This period saw unprecedented investment when businessmen shed their cautious approach to risk in search of massive financial rewards. One of the first companies to build a chain of cinemas was Electric Palaces Limited. By 1910, they had raised over £130,000 and opened 10 picture houses. This ground floor of a former restaurant and hotel cum brothel at 87 Notting Hill Gate was one of those converted into a cinematograph hall. Let us listen to the businessman Horace Sedger as he announces the opening of the Electric Palace on the 15th of April, 1911.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I speak to you on behalf of my fellow business partner, Mr. Edward Lowe, who regretfully cannot be here today due to ill health. We have over 30 years' experience in the theatre business in the West End of London. A little while ago, we were both busy booking acts for a variety show, when a friend of ours said, "Forget about the monkeys and the wrestlers. Why not fix up a picture show?" "Yes," we said. "Let us provide the public with a pictorial equivalent of the high-class plays and dramas they are accustomed to." So in 1908, we took on a small hall over in Shepherd's Bush, and it was a big success. The public came and saw over 2 hours of moving pictures. But there are these naysayers who say that our films corrupt the minds of the young and the impressionable. They say there is no future in this newfangled technology. Humbug, we say. The cinema is a mere infant. Already, the irritating flicker on the screen and the whir of the projector is gone. Soon, we will be able to produce films in their natural colour using the new French process. This means that we can take events during the day and put them on the screen that same evening. We intend to produce a large factory to create these films. And while the films may be silent, we intend to have a full orchestra in every cinema where there is room. Alas, at this Electric Palace, there's only room for a pianist. But if you look around, you can see that no expense has been spared in creating a classically themed theatre for you all. The plasterwork is a fusion of fruit and foliage. So sit back in your seats and enjoy a thrilling ride through our opening program of films, which are scandalously free of offence and vulgarity. They represent the best of British, and I have a vision that these films will reach out across the worldwide empire.
offensive, vulgar, I think not. A more pressing matter was the inflammability of celluloid film. Small fires broke out in the projection room of this cinema in the years 1914 and 1915. The management blamed the two technicians who had been warned not to read their newspapers when at work. 1,000 feet of film was damaged, and the two projectionists fired. Let us listen to one worker from this period who wrote a ditty about the uncomfortable and exhausting work of being a projectionist.
I'm here in a fireproof box that is hot as a stokehole floor, and my head goes round to a clicking sound and a rickety motor's roar, and my nose smells films, and my tongue tastes films, and my eyes, they can see films too, till I'm sick unto death of the thought of films. I'm only fit to be pulling films through the slits of a rusty gate. And for the sake of mother and home and 25 shillings a week. The crowds that go to each picture show never think how a film is shown. I have to pay if a thing goes wrong, for the management dock my pay. It's a penny a rack and a penny a break, though the programme is far from new. I'm wet with oil and I'm choked with dirt till I haven't the heart to eat. I'm working up here to my neck in films. Outlaw redeemed by baby films, redskins attacking the white folk films, comic chase over the rooftop films ought to be cut by the censor films. And thank heavens, the programme's through. Now rewind the films once more like a careful operator. Never mind my aching head. Think about your films instead.
A new corporation called the Embassy News and Interest Theatre took over the running of this cinema. In 1931, they converted it to sound film presentation. Say Goodbye to the Electric and Hello Darling to the Embassy. So hurry up and take your seats as the newsreel has just finished and an old British movie, a quota quickie, is about to start.
We won't be late if you didn't have to post that letter. Who is it to?
I told you, it's one of my army buddies. We're going to meet up soon.
You never mentioned before.
Shh, there, sausage free here for us. Mary?
What?
You don't suppose
Suppose what?
that man over there just looks...
What man?
You don't suppose
What on earth are you talking about?
he looks like he cannot be. He cannot be.
But it was Robert Donat. He was one of the most successful British actors and Hollywood film stars of his era. In 1948, he visited the Embassy Repertory Cinema, Notting Hill, and sat in that seat just there, where the gentleman in black is seated. After the screening, he talked to the manager about wanting to see it firsthand how audiences responded to an old film of his. Before we watch a montage of wonderful Robert Donat films, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Victoria Lowe. She is lecturer in drama and screen studies at Manchester University, which also houses the Robert Donat Archive. Victoria.
Hello everybody, hello. I've come here just to say a few words about Robert Donat, and a few words are probably just not enough to describe what a fantastic film actor he was. A film and stage actor throughout the 1930s, 40s and 50s, originally from Manchester, which is why we have his archive, which is a fantastic collection of documents and letters from people like Hitchcock and Alexander Korda. And he basically had elocution lessons when he was young because his Polish father didn't want him to have a Manchester accent. So, and that kind of helped develop his, I think, quite extraordinary voice. You saw him in the first clip as William Freeze Green, I think quite out-acting Laurence Olivier as well. I mean, you don't really share the screen with Laurence Olivier and come out on top, but he did. Basically he had this amazing sort of voice that I think was very consistent throughout his roles, which were really very different. And what was unusual, I think, about him for a film actor at the time, for a British film actor, is that he was very respectful of film as a kind of new medium for the actor. He wrote a piece in a sort of collection of essays in 1936 on film acting. And he was trying to kind of develop and think of ways he could develop his craft. So one of the amazing sort of artifacts in the Donat archive that completely intrigued me when I started studying it was something called the emotion chart, which we've got up here. And this was done, prepared for him for his role in The Citadel, a role, doctor called Andrew Manson. It was made in 1937. And he basically set out all the scenes, you can kind of see in the red there, and tried to chart what he thought was his kind of emotional intensity in each scene. And this, I think, was very much because what he found most challenging about being a film actor was the fact that it was all shot at different times. So you had the location shots first, and then so he might be doing his final scene right early in the schedule. So this was a way of trying to create a kind of coherence and kind of continuity about it. And this is sort of, 20 years before the method, and film acting as a kind of craft became a bit more put forward. So you can kind of see there that he, looked as if he sort of was coming into a sort of intensity, then he'd go right down and then go right up. And I think I've looked at the film, and unfortunately we can't show you the film, and often what is it's being expressed is through his voice as well. He was a very, very careful and kind of poetic actor. And the voice, I think, was all the more hard-won because he suffered from terrible asthma all through his life. So to produce these performances was quite difficult for him. I could go on and on and on, but do please see a wonderful selection of his films now, seek him out, and do come and see the archive in Manchester if you're ever up there. Thank you.
Bicycling through Austria. Good heavens.
Now let's make ourselves as comfortable as possible. What about that skirt of yours? Still pretty damp, Don't want to be tied to a pneumonia case on top of everything else. Take it off, I don't mind.
I shall keep it on, thank you.
For sudden, the worst turns the best to the brave. The black minutes at end. And the elements rage, the fiend voices that rave, shall dwindle, shall blend, shall change, shall become first a peace out of pain, then a light, then thy breast, O thou soul of my soul, I shall clasp thee again. And with God with the rest. Do you like it?
It's optimistic like the English.
George, look! I got his autograph. For Mary, a true fan, Robert, kiss, kiss. What was wrong?
Nothing.
Oh, you're not going to tell me you prefer those films with the babes and guns and those American films?
No, I really like the film. Yes, I cannot believe he's there and on the screen at the same time, and next minute talking to you.
Oh, silly. Just go over to him. He's really friendly.
Is he?
Come on, let's get the 52 bus and you can walk me to my front door.
Filed under G among the papers of Robert Donat is a typewritten note from one of his more secretive fans. It reads as follows: "Will you meet at midnight on Sunday, outside Boots, Piccadilly Circus? I love you, George." In 1957, again under new management, the Embassy became the Classic, showing a combination of old British and American movies. In addition, they had European X-rated films with adult themes. A CinemaScope screen was installed, but mass cinema going was in decline. In a parallel world, exciting developments were taking place in film culture. The 1960s witnessed a new wave of independent and art-based films being made on lightweight and portable cameras. Before we arrive at our next chapter, let us invite Adam Ritchie to the stage and hear how he made his film Room 1301 with Yvette Nachimas in New York in 1966. Adam.
The film was made in New York on 16 millimeter on film on a Bolex camera, so it's probably done with optical sound. And unfortunately, after 30 years, the film was dangerous and fire hazard. So the Yvette, a friend of mine who was in the film and whose idea it was, had to copy it and copied it pretty badly. And so now what you're going to see is a pale shadow of the original film, I'm afraid. It's only 17 minutes, so not too long to bear. Brief explanation. She came to New York, to New York City, and got a job on a high up in a skyscraper, and didn't know where to get coffee. And they told her to go up, the coffee ladies on the next floor up. She went up, and then couldn't come down with her thing because the elevator, the lift, didn't come. She went down some stairs, and stairs are not for going up and down, they're for fire escape only. She had to walk down 20-something stories down into the basement, and she finally went through a light which called the fire brigade and said there was a fire there. And she went back inside the building when the fire people had gone, because it was a false alarm, and didn't say anything to anyone. Anyway, so we made the film about what it's like in New York office buildings, and the idea is she's delivering a parcel called Room 13101, which doesn't exist in New York because it goes from the 12th floor to the 14th floor. I hope that's enough. Thank you.
People get to bring the book, at least we start questioning To become familiar with the faces of every worker permitted to leave the plant. This facilitated the FBI's difficult job of tracing all of their activities and all of their contacts.
Jones, Jordan Jones, Josephine Jones, Julia Jones, Kathleen Jones, Kenneth Jones, Jones, Lowe Jones,
You're in the 50 generation.
Jones, Leslie Jones, Louis Jones, Louise Jones, Marjorie Jones,
Maddie, Mrs. Smith, Maddie,
Jones,
Smith,
Michael
Smith,
Jones,
Smith,
Maura
Smith,
Jones,
Smith,
Melvin
Maud,
Jones,
Smith, Maud,
Meredith Jones,
Smith,
Merrill
Maud,
Jones,
Smith,
Milton
Smith,
Jones,
Smith, Maurice,
Jones,
Max,
Mildred
Smith,
Jones,
Smith,
Milton
May,
Jones,
Smith,
Minnie Jones,
May,
Montgomery
Mrs.
Jones,
Smith
Mosleen
and
Jones,
Thornton, Smith, McDonald,
Jones,
Deere,
Naomi
Smith,
Jones,
McGrady,
Natalie
Smith,
Jones,
McKinley,
Neil
Smith, McKinley,
Jones,
Smith,
Nellie
Meeker,
Jones,
Engineering
Noel Jones,
Company,
Norma Jones,
Smith, Melinda,
Rhoda
Smith,
Jones,
Melissy,
Richards Jones,
Smith, Melody,
Robert
Smith, Melvin,
Jones,
Smith, Melvin, Smith, Melvin,
Robin
Smith,
Jones,
Melvin,
Rodney
Smith,
Jones. Well, I hadn't been working there very long. In fact, it was my second day, I think. And it was a very large company. And they told me right off that I would have a coffee break at 10:15, and I would have a lunch break at noon. And like that, you know. Well, the first day I didn't take my coffee break because there wasn't very much time, and it didn't seem possible to leave the building, so I didn't. For the second day, someone came around and said, has anyone showed you where the coffee cafeteria is? And I said no, and she said, well, come along, I'll show you where it is. So she took me up. It was just one flight up, as it turns out, and we took the elevator. So it took a long time for the elevator to come, as I remember, and we got up there, and there was a line, a long line, and I waited, and she waited with me, but then once I got my coffee, she got involved in conversation with some other people. So I decided to leave. you know, to go back downstairs with my coffee. But I thought, it's not good. So I thought I'd just take the stairs.
Mr. Matthews' office. Well, she's out of her office at the moment. May I take a message for her? Oh, yes, she's in the building somewhere.
What? 1301.
1301?
Right.
I don't think there is a room 1301.
But there has to be. This is the address they gave me.
Well, I don't know. I just started here. I don't know really.
Precipitation probability near 0 through Friday. Winds north to northwest, 10 to 15 miles per hour this afternoon and Friday, and 10 miles per hour or less tonight.
I go back out again. And I heard people on the other side of the door. And they, you know, there was like a lot of them. And there was a ladies' room, I remembered, right next to the exit door. So I knocked on the door and I asked if they would, you know, like, just knocked. And no one responded. I could hear them, but they couldn't seem to hear me. So I went up one flight of stairs and I tried the door there, and it too was locked. And I heard people's voices again, and I, you know, banged on the door again, and they just didn't hear me. By this time I was a little perplexed, a little amused, and a little bit frightened, you know, all at the same time. So I decided that the only thing to do was just to walk down the stairs. So I walked down 2 flights and I tried the door and it was locked, and I heard voices again and I tried the same thing. You know,
she'll pass along to the hall where they'll receive her.
Somewhere else. Well, anyway. Excuse me. I continued my, you know, I continued down the stairs trying each door as I went. Each door was locked. Till I got to what looked like the basement of the building. And there didn't seem to be anybody around. I was looking for a janitor. And, pardon. And there just didn't seem to be any life down there at all. And it was all gray, and there were lots of pipes. It was obviously the basement of the building. I didn't know whether there was a sub-basement or not, but I couldn't find any way out of there. And I was looking for a boiler room or something, you know, but I couldn't find anything. It just seemed to be a lot of corridors. Well, I walked, because there was nothing else to do, trying to find a door. And finally I saw a long corridor, and at the end of which seemed to be a door, and it looked like it might be a door that would let me out. And as I turned the corner, I heard this incredible siren-like noise, just sort of a bleeping going on and off and on and off. And as soon as I heard the noise, I also saw a light going on and off and on and off. And I really couldn't
Black Gordon, 529 Broadway, one flight up, one at 125. Over.
There were a crowd of people, you know, hovering about. And there was one man in particular who kept saying to me, what are you doing in there? You're not supposed to be in there. Why are you there? Don't you know that that's a fire exit? It's only for emergencies. Do you realize that you set off the fire alarm and the police alarm, that it's electronically controlled?
Our calling is not equipped to receive incoming calls. Please obtain the main number of the company from the directory or information and try your call again. This is a recording.
the floor, and I didn't tell anybody what had happened because it was just, I was new, and you know how it is when you're new. You don't like to appear too stupid, and I felt very stupid. And I went back to my desk and I drank my coffee, and I was hoping that nobody would come and tap me on the shoulder.
Can you please help me? Yeah, what is, yes? I'm trying to locate 1301. I understand it's on this floor.
Oh, no. No, you're on the wrong floor. Now, look, yeah, it's downstairs. All right, so you go through those doors, right up there, right behind you. Turn around to your right there, right there. You go, and there's an exit. It's only one floor down. You don't want to take the elevator. Just go through the exit on your right. There's a red light, and you go downstairs one flight. And then when you get out of the exit, you turn left. I think it's, no, you turn right again, and then you go around in front of the elevators. And then you go through, there's a big, well, it's a double door. Go through the double door. And then you come out, there's these offices, and there's a small corridor, you go down your left, and I think it's right there. When you get there, you could ask somebody, there's a secretary down there, I think. Just turn, right behind you, and go through those doors.
Mapped out, very carefully organized. And it was a public relations firm within a larger agency. And they were handling things like big steel accounts, mostly industry. And the person I worked for mostly wrote the copy for these big companies like Tom Mansfield or one of those
for room
big
1301.
places.
Oh.
And there's a door, a green door. You go through the door and keep going, and then you turn left. And after you turn left, there are two more doors, but go through the one on the left. No, the right. Yeah, the right. Keep going, and there's a small flight of steps.
And we were situated on the 18th floor. Well, she said she would show me how to get there, and she did. And I went up there with her. And I thought it very strange that we had to take an elevator one flight. But we did, and we waited about 10 minutes before we got that elevator. So once I got my coffee, I think maybe I'll just walk down the stairs, it's just one flight. And I opened the door, and as soon as I did, it closed behind me, and I realized that it was locked, and I tried it, and it was locked. And so I began to bang on the door because I'd heard people on the other side. And I thought, they surely will hear me, and they knocked on it, and they really knocked on it quite loudly, and no one responded to it at all. So I decided to go up to the next floor, which was the floor I was working on at the time. And that door was locked, and well, let's see what happened. I walked out to the 19th floor, and it was locked. And I decided to go down, like a few flights, and I ended up on the 13th floor. And on the 13th floor, I knocked on the door. I tried it. It just wouldn't open.
We have arrived in the 1970s. Cinemas around the country are being closed and turned into bingo halls or redeveloped into flats. The Classic in Notting Hill is about to close down due to lack of business. Barbara and David Stone, doyens of progressive American cinema and political activists in the 1960s, have now settled in England with their children. In London, they team up with a businessman and buy this cinema. They name it The Gate. Their policy is to discover and then screen the best new independent and alternative films from all around the world. They show films that would normally not get dubbed, nor find a wider audience. Barbara and David also formed a company called Cinegate that would distribute these independent films. So, it's 1974, the UK has joined the common market, and you've purchased your 60 pence ticket. What's the first film you will see at the recently opened gate? Fear Eats the Soul by Rainer Werner Fassbinder. A poignant love story with a raw edge, as a middle-aged woman falls in love with and marries a younger man who has come to Germany from Morocco. This film and those shown in the following years made The Gate a box office and critical success. The repertoire included Derek Jarman's debut film, Sebastiane. At its screening in 1974 was one Nigel Andrews. He was just starting out on his career as the film critic of the Financial Times. Let us bring Nigel to the stage and invite him to share some of his memories of The Gate and the people he ran. Thank you, Nigel.
Yes, it was a transforming moment when David and Barbara Stone took over this cinema and then found other cinemas to show their films in. Fear Eats the Soul introduced Fassbinder. They showed other films from New German cinema, and it became a kind of centre for showing innovative art movies from Europe and around the world. But more than that, they were people who were very hands-on and hard-working in terms of persuading critics to see the films before they'd had a proper press show. They were very good at introducing critics to filmmakers. I remember they had a wonderful, large kind of neo-Victorian Gothic, as I remember, in looks, house in Phillimore Place, if I have the name right. And one of the first times, if not the first time I was invited there, they'd brought a filmmaker over from America who I had not heard of. Young guy, shortish guy, had a bit of an asthma, funnily enough, talking of Robert Donat, had a bit of an asthma problem. Very fast talking, very enthusiastic, and he was telling us, because there were other people than me there, that he had this idea for a new movie he was going to make about a troubled taxi driver in New York, starring an unknown actor called Robert De Niro. And so finally we realized this was an up-and-coming filmmaker who had made a marvelous film called Mean Streets, actually, with De Niro. But that was typical of the kind of people you would be invited to Phillimore Place to meet. Bertolucci was there on another occasion, and it was a kind of salon for independent filmmakers from around the world. And they were wonderful hosts. David was very fast-talking and wouldn't let you go until he persuaded you of his argument, but was also kind of funny and sort of warm-hearted as well. Barbara was really quite a star in terms of British film distribution, at least. She could be tough, sassy, and very Brooklyn at one extreme, and kind of relaxed and serene and glamorous in a family environment as a kind of young mother figure. You'd have to imagine a kind of cross between television's Judge Judy, if you know her, at one end, and Isabella Rossellini at another, because she had been a model and she was very striking looking. Later on, they introduced some more controversial movies, one of which was Derek Jarman's Sebastiane, and Empire of the Senses, the Japanese film. And again, they showed the film early to one or two critics in order to get some heat behind the campaign to persuade the censor that he didn't need to cut these films or ban them. Curiously enough, the last time that I met David and Barbara Stone together, I invited them round to BAFTA, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, for lunch because I wanted to interview them and get words from them on a book I was writing about, of all people, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because one of the first films they opened was Pumping Iron at a time when Arnold Schwarzenegger was unheard of by anyone except people in the bodybuilding world. It was before Conan the Barbarian and the Terminator. And they told me a lot of kind of nice stories about how they'd had Arnold over, hosted him around London, when, as I say, he was still nothing but a young sort of ex-Austrian bodybuilder. And I remember couple of the things they told me. For the Stones, Arnold was a high-performance charm machine. He did everything he was asked in terms of meeting the press and posing for publicity photos. He had a real serious personal drive about him, says David. He said, "I'm going to be bigger than Sylvester Stallone," which at that time was considered impossible, since Stallone was the kind of mega film star that Arnold did later become. In the meantime, the bodybuilding machine needed fuel. David would go jogging with him every morning around Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens, after which they would stop off for breakfast at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. He'd have a dozen scrambled eggs, remembers Stone. So bacon, ham, toast, a steak. And then David and Barbara would have him over to their flat. Arnold was staying around the corner from them in Kensington, where a large bowl of fruit had been put out for the general delectation of guests. It was gone in an hour, says Barbara. I don't think anyone else ever touched it. They were wonderful days, and I can say, and I'm happy to say it in front of Jordan and Alexandra Stone, their children, who are here, that they were a unique couple in terms of the pizzazz they brought to distribution and exhibition. And they took critics out occasionally to dinner at Joe Allen's, and they were memorable occasions, and they would kind of do their spiel about what films they were going to be opening and what kind of filmmakers they were going to bring over. But they did it with such sort of dash and good-heartedness and friendliness that their days I miss. I mean, they were in my early days as a film critic, and since then, frankly, no one has come over from any part of the world, even America, with quite their panache and commitment to promoting movies.
I was introduced to David and Barbara, and then I found out it was the moment where I was opening Novecento, little by little, who they were. So we are at the Gate Theatre, and a friend of mine tells me that they were this couple from New York.
Go or action?
Action.
Okay. One funny thing was, on Monday nights, cinemas didn't do very good business, so they gave away free dishes. And so poor people, like my parents, they went to the cinema on Monday nights, and everyone knew from the dishes you had in your house whether they came from the cinema or you went out and bought them. Do you listen to it? Do you?
Of course, I know exactly what it is.
No, because you're always around.
Yeah, let's figure out the
It's not on yet. It's
January
starting.
9th,
Yeah.
I think. Oh, it's today. I moved out of my parents' apartment when I was about 19. I decided I was working full-time and going to Brooklyn College at night, so I had enough money to pay rent. So I rented this apartment near Brooklyn College.
The Saturday nights at the Stones were extraordinary. We sat around and drank, then the dinner, and then the film. And the films were marvellous. David Meeker, who worked for the National Film Archive, would slip along with something which he just found, and so you never knew what you were going to see. Except I have to say that I often didn't see them because the evenings ran along so charmingly and so late that just before the film started, I realised my last tube was going home. So I very often missed the film, but that was my loss.
Talk about Barbara and of course David. It's not like some special like anecdotes or some little events that come to my mind. Cassis Festival, the Living Theatre. I mean, this was an immense event that Jerome Hill undertook, and he put Barbara and David in charge of it. In my memory, they are inseparable. When I hear Barbara Stone, I see also David Stone. And it's very, almost impossible for me to talk about Barbara Stone without talking all at the same time about David Stone. All the projects that we worked together, it was always like initiated, came through like David, and then Barbara immediately steps in, and then it's always two, beginning with Spoleto Film Festival, with Hallelujah the Hills, the New Steel project. It was always like, it's a team to me, it's like, I cannot, the only exception is that it was Barbara Stone who fed me.
Yesterday, Allen Ginsberg died. Goodbye, I cried. I didn't say Kaddish, nor howl. He had already written those in almost prose, and poetry of utmost strength and newly broken rules. Powerful, that Allen G. He spoke to me. I went to hear him read his poems at Brooklyn College. That voice added to my knowledge and love of poems he wrote. And now I read these works again with a newfound sense of how he changed the form and sounds of poetry forever, that Allen Ginsberg treasure.
Na, was ist? Kommst mit heute oder nicht?
Nein.
Ach, und warum?
Schwanz kaputt.
The Stones' pioneering reign at the Gate came to an end in 1985 when they sold off their business, including the 3 other cinemas that became part of the Gate chain. McDonald's wanted to buy this cinema and convert it into a fast food restaurant. They'd not reckoned with local residents and London cinephiles, who had a tender spot for the Gate. The McDonald's planning application was turned down, and the Gate continued employing its projectionists and showing 35mm art house movies.
Hey! Hey! Come here! Hey! Where's your trousers? Come on! Come back here! All
What is this madness? Have they stepped out of a scene from a film? Let me think. Oh yes, I can see an archive memory. Here is the Kensington Post from 1996. The management at the Gate Cinema, Notting Hill, is mystified by newspaper reports that a couple of film buffs stripped off during a steamy scene from the film Chronicle of a Death Foretold, now showing at the cinema. The couple was supposed to have been copying the film's star, Rupert Everett, who stripped during a show in Italy. The manager of the Gate said,
We haven't heard anything about it, and we run the place.
It was also in 1996 that the Portobello Film Festival was first established, and Jonathan Barnett has been involved from the very beginning. Let us invite Jonathan to the stage and hear about the film he shot on VHS video and how the medium transformed the world of independent filmmaking. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. I lived in Portobello since 1977, and it was a fantastic area. I don't know if anyone around here can remember it. It was all squats and everything was cheap and free music and all the rest of it. And of course everyone used to come to the Gate, especially at the weekends where it was like a party. But I was making films at the time, and then the VHS cameras came along, and for the first time you could make a film basically for nothing because it had sound and you could shoot as much as you wanted to. And one of the characters that used to live around here, I think his last wife came from a big squat in Bristol Gardens in Maida Vale, was Ronnie Laing. And I sort of met up with him, and he was going off to Iona to do a seminar, a week-long seminar on mind, body and spirit in the Christian tradition. So we all went off to the Abbey on Iona, and I did film it, but like all of these things, most of it's been lost, and what you're going to see now is a copy of VHS. But he was a very interesting man, and it's a shame that there aren't more people like him around now.
Will time say nothing? But I told you so. If I could tell you, I would let you know.
Psychiatry is regarded in these same terms still today. That is not a definable science, you know, it's not a pragmatic thing like surgery or some of the other medical sciences.
I hope it is still, and I'm sorry to say I don't think it is so much regarded with suspicion by other branches of medicine and by the population in general. I think it's managed to achieve a most regrettable and disastrous degree of credibility.
I was going to say in terms of that, is it not in fact the case that you yourself regard most of your fellow psychiatrists with a great deal of suspicion?
I do indeed.
Why?
because I think they are perpetuating a system of oppression and repression and destructiveness of other people in the world. But at the same time, very few of them have got at least the enlightenment to be at least hypocritical about it. Most of them believe that what they're doing is for other people's good as well as their own. The questions I've been asking in the last few months have been mainly to do with not about the meaning of life, which I don't have to ask about anymore, and the existence of God, which I don't have to ask about, and questions of that order, and so on. But I've been more specific things to do with the nature of sex, paranoia, jealousy, the relationship of magic and demons and, to the Inquisition and witchcraft, and to trying to understand more about the nature of the mind of the inquisitorial mind, which seems to have taken over our whole society in many ways. Anyone can find that out who wants to convene a dream group and meet once a week and share dreams together. And you find dreams start, every dream group that I have, 100% that I've ever heard of reports the same phenomena. After some while, maybe immediately or maybe after a bit, the dreams start to interplay with other people's dreams and other people's waking life realities. So there is a transpersonal factor, not only an intrapersonal factor or an interpersonal factor, but a transpersonal force field of some kind at work, affecting us all. Synchronous. The hearing of voices, the seeing of visions, possibly precognition, and other things. The Buddha said that all these characteristics are the characteristics of the normal, ordinary human mind. For 6 hours I just listened to him telling me about schizophrenia and that sort of thing. He was a much older man than me. This was 25 years ago. I mean, when I heard him talking about this, I had already written A Divided Self. So I asked him, what do you think is the real sort of deepest fear that besets us? And he replied without any hesitation, because it was obviously something he had pondered deeply upon himself. He said, unconditional love. Unconditional love. What are we most afraid of? Unconditional love. What are we most afraid of? Put it another way, forgiveness.
There was an area that we thought many of us had been edited out of our existence. Things like demons being possessed by spirits, bad spirits taking possession of people. And I get the impression that for, say, the past 20 years, you've been arguing that these things have not really gone away.
When you say in the last 20 years, maybe you're referring to the politics of experience, where
well,
the first place I was explicit about that, but I never ever thought that they had gone away.
But most of your colleagues thought they had.
Yes, they had. So?
So where is the difference?
I know they haven't gone away, and they thought they had gone away. That's the difference.
And how do you recognize them then?
That's an esoteric secret.
You're not really going to argue to a secular society nowadays that people can be possessed by demons, are you?
I'm going to tell them that. I'm not arguing, I'm telling them.
On what basis?
That's an esoteric secret. Because I'm not going to tell a secular society who doesn't even in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man has his remaining eye plucked out. Allowed to hear the sound of your own voice. You're not allowed to talk within oneself, not out loud in public, with oneself. That is forbidden. In other words, you're not supposed to have any relationship with yourself at all. You're supposed to only mindlessly conform to what other people tell you to be and to do and to think and to feel. As soon as you have a relationship with yourself, you're a free man. As soon as they discover a free man, they kill him. Well, I'm confessing to be a free man. I'm confessing that I'm not a slave.
In this programme, we have heard Prospice by Robert Browning from the lips of Robert Donat. Fear death, to feel the fog in my throat, the mist in my face. And R.D. Laing reciting If I Could Tell You by W.H. Auden. Time will say nothing but I told you so. Words into images, the poetries of cinema. We've moved from the Electric Palace to the contemporary Gate Picture House, from films projected by disgruntled workers to state-of-the-art digital and surround sound. A picture house that opened in 1911 with 480 seats and room for 200 standing has 170 seats in the house today. I'm not sure whether there is a policy on standing nowadays. Tickets at the time of opening were threepence up to a shilling, equivalent to £1 or so in today's currency. I believe the cheapest tickets to be had at the gate today are £7.70 on a Monday and £14.50 otherwise. We've seen how one-reel shorts gave way to feature-length independent movies that pushed the boundaries of convention and taste. We have glimpsed how the history of this cinema has been shaped by pioneering figures with one eye on entertainment or art and the other on box office takings and managing a sustainable business in a constantly changing world. We have experienced the power of film stars and their impact on their audiences. We have celebrated the history of film made on fragile celluloid stock, and we regret how many of these films are damaged or missing. For the majority of silent films are lost to us. Even Robert Donat's first film is on the British Film Institute's list of the most wanted 75 lost films. And this fragility of image carries on into the era of videotape and beyond. The Gate, through all these 100 years of evolving technology, aesthetics and economics, has managed to remain a cinema. And who knows what is to come. In our Q&A, we will chat to the current cinema manager, Lee Elwood, and hear more about how he sees the future of the Gate Picture House. Now we conclude our film programme by introducing Constantine Gras, a local artist and filmmaker who has curated this event. Constantine, thank you.
Afternoon. This is the third film programme that I've curated for the Portobello Film Festival, and it's probably my most ambitious. Hopefully it's not my last. I'm conscious that I've submitted you to the way that I think as an artist. I often play with several ideas in my mind. It's sort of akin to a dialectical process, and there's a degree of risk in that. But put simply, this event was primarily to celebrate the Gate and put on a mixed programme of short films that echoed what an audience might have seen in 1911. Newsreel drama, classic film stars, emerging and independent spirits. And I'd like to thank the actors for bringing this to life: Richard Seedhouse, Claire Finn, Harvey Stevens, and our lovely narrator, Jackie Cairns. Special thanks to Adriano Solari for the costuming, and of course to our guest speakers, Victoria Lowe and Nigel Andrews. This event also allowed me to pay my respects to two cool dudes, Adam Ritchie and Jonathan Barnett. I discovered Adam's amazing photographs of the play spaces underneath the Westway flyover, and these chimed with my childhood, and I've used them in several of my films. I wanted to share the only film he has made thus far. Hopefully he might make some more. It's never too late. And one that's never been screened before. And the same with Jonathan Barnett, who has kindly supported my films at the festival each year, and is the driving force for an amazing festival of film culture, free film culture, that takes place every year and gives up-and-coming filmmakers a chance to screen their films to a live audience. Now, I don't want to say too much about the film that will conclude this programme, but just prior to making it, I had a very difficult time personally and artistically. I don't think there are too many artists who have made their feature-length film debut and then have had to submit this to the police as evidence and withdraw it from public viewing. I'm talking about my involvement with Grenfell Tower, where I was an artist in residence. I was commissioned by the tenant management organisation in 2015-16 to make a short promotional film about the renovated Grenfell. I knew straight away that I couldn't make that film given the level of dispute between residents and the TMO and building contractors. Instead, I made an hour-long portrait of 6 residents who lived on the estate and their critical thoughts and feelings. This was a development, I felt, to my meditative approach to filmmaking. The film you're about to see is actually the third part of a trilogy, and I have to thank Stewart Wallace, the gardener at Lancaster West Estate. Is Stewart Wallace at all here? Has he come along to the screening? Perhaps he is here somewhere hiding in the shadows. For sharing his time in the garden space with me. This film is dedicated to the memory of the 72 people who died at Grenfell Tower. Thank you. we've had a bit of a history of the building, but we sort of stopped short a little bit of the present day. So it'd be quite nice to just get a sense of what is the Gate Picture House currently at the moment? Was it? Is it part of the chain? What's the ethos behind
the Gate in its present form is part of the Picture House chain. They were also bought out just over a year ago by Cineworld. There hasn't been any dramatic changes so far. Cineworld appear to be very keen to keep Picture House as it is, as a separate entity. There have been some differences back of house, but that's been for the better. There's nothing that you guys would particularly notice has been anything majorly different. Claire Binns runs Picture House, and she has a particular soft spot for the Gate. She used to come here many years ago as a guest and just come and watch films here. She then, throughout her career, working her way all the way up from the bottom, started her first programming job was to look after the Gate many years ago. And even though now she's at the top of the tree, she still checks in every now and again just to make sure that everything's still ticking over quite nicely.
Sounds good. And in terms of the screening, what's the policy? Independent?
It's a bit difficult. We're still, we are still classed as an independent, but technically we are practically a chain now. There's 26 cinemas in Picture House, and it is growing. It's going to be another 3 or 4 over the coming year to 18 months. There's going to be a new one actually just down the road in Fulham Broadway, which could be interesting because it's super close to us, so I'm not entirely sure how that's going to impact us here, but we have quite a loyal following, and I can't imagine it's going to do too much damage.
Sure. And I'd like to thank you for hosting our event and connecting up with Jonathan in terms of sort of getting the Portobello Film Festival tied into the Gate. I'd like to just ask Dylan to say a few words perhaps about your memories of the Gate from the 70s. You obviously were very young in the 1970s, but...
Is this on? Yeah.
Yes, I think
yeah. I grew up in this cinema. I mean, since I was born in '67, and I was I'm 52 now, so I was 3 or 4 when we came to this country in 1970. And I spent my entire childhood, adolescence, and into my 20s in the cinema, watching late night films, screenings for critics like Nigel Andrews talked about, that frequently we would have special screenings on Sunday mornings or at any time when the cinema wasn't open to screen potential films or films that friends of my parents wanted to show to them. And there was always a projectionist that was hired just for those few hours, just to make sure that they could screen the film for friends or birthdays for at every level. The cinema was used constantly throughout the day, throughout the week, all year round. And of course there were late night films from 11 o'clock till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, every single night of the week. And so I did not grow up in a conventional family, so of course I lived around the corner, secondary school was around the corner. And so I would be frequently here at night at hours that I wasn't supposed to be up, and taking a taxi home with maybe my brothers or my sister, and getting home and without anyone knowing that I had watched the late night films or been playing around with some of the staff also. It was. It was my childhood. Yeah.
And did you also work here? Because I was talking to your brother, you were a little bit younger. Your brother's a little bit older than you, Jordan, who told me that he was basically after he clocked off school, he would be here cleaning the projection, helping with the distribution of the films, catching taxis to do.
Well, actually, I worked at Cinegate, which was around the corner, but we were all recruited as children to be working at my parents at Cinegate. So that was everything from collating catalogues, the Cinegate film catalogue, where that was sent. They produced hundreds of these catalogues every year to be sent out around the world to universities, to other countries that had independent cinema chains, so that they could also rent those films wherever my parents didn't have the European or British rights to a specific film. So, of course, they would want other countries to rent those films that my parents held the rights to, because there were hundreds and hundreds of films that they owned the rights to in Cinegate. At that time, you would buy the rights for a film for a certain region of the world, and so that's where the Cinegate.
Does that still exist at all, Cinegate?
No.
What's happened now? Okay.
No, because the films would have been taken, the rights would have been finished, and they would have been bought by. Now it would be, I've just forgotten what's the name of, well, there's various different,
Sure.
companies that would do that, yeah.
Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit, because we heard earlier from Dr. Victoria Lowe about the Rubber Donut Archive, which is in Manchester University, and I've had the pleasure of being one of the first persons.
You are the first.
I'm the first person to come down to King's College London to look at the. Is it the Barbara Stone archive?
It is.
Archive of Your Mother.
It is.
Which is quite a substantial collection.
It is, yeah.
And perhaps you can say a little bit about that archive and how people might have to access it over the years.
In the mid to late 50s, my parents started to go to a film club in New York City that was run by a man called Herman Weinberg. And Herman Weinberg was a film academic, and he ran these film clubs in New York in the 50s. And that was, I would imagine, Scorsese, who Nigel Andrews said that he met with my parents. He would have been going to those film clubs. I would imagine every East Coast or whatever American filmmaker was around in the 50s would have been going to Herman Weinberg film clubs and watching the films. And my mum
Which
always
cinema was he showing it in?
No, it wasn't a cinema. It was a film club. It might have been the New Yorker. It might have possibly, but I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. But it wouldn't be difficult to find out because he's written many books. My mum always used to say that he didn't actually really say very much. He would just screen the film, and it was just by his taste alone that's really how you would get a real feeling for really, really great cinema. And that was apparently how he really did run his film clubs. And anyway, so my mum collected everything. Books, paperwork, letters, documents, absolutely everything you can think of, all the films that they produced all through the 60s and into the 70s, all the paperwork, every single thing that you can possibly, anything connected to independent film production, she saved on their films. That would be everything from the subtitles that were made if it was distributed in France, or the editing paperwork, everything you can imagine. Anyway, so King's College London, the head of film at King's College is a man called Mark Shield, and he interviewed my mum because he was doing a 1968 week-long series of films at the BFI, and he wanted to show some of my parents' documentaries with the documentary film organization. It was really a cooperative that they helped found in the early 60s, and called Newsreel. And he was showing some of their films, and he interviewed her because he wanted her to be part of the panel. Unfortunately, she died before, that was in June last year. But anyway, so when he found out that she had this massive archive from the mid-50s all the way up until last year, he asked the head of the archive and the library to get in touch with us, and they spent 3 days looking through everything. and they said actually on the end of the first day that we want this archive, and it's every posters, programs. It's an amazing archive of radical film, art film, political activism. Yeah, and it's that's what the archive consists of, and some really a lot of photography, posters, books. So they've taken away. It's a large group of boxes. I was there just meeting the head of the archive one day because I had a few books that they had forgotten, and his assistant said, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "Oh, my mum, Dylan's done. It's my mum's archive he took." And she said, "Oh God, that's a big archive." So that was a really nice thing to hear, and yeah. So it's I would imagine in the next year or so it will all be catalogued and ready to look at. And Constantine was the first person to look for stuff. In fact, he took out that first still that was the front of a catalogue, or the inside pages of a catalogue.
Catalogue, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dylan.
Yeah.
Perhaps if I can just ask, I will ask the audience to ask some questions shortly, but I'll just quickly whiz through and ask Adam, perhaps if you'd like to explain a little bit about how you connected between New York and North Kensington, because obviously you made this film in New York. I didn't really know you at that time that you made this film, but I know you for your photography work in North Kensington, not your Pink Floyd, which you're internationally known for sort of documenting the first Pink Floyd concerts, but actually really liked, and I think I may have reunited you with some of your lost photographs of North Kensington, the play spaces that you captured in the late 60s and 70s around the Westway. Perhaps you'd like to tell the audience a little bit about how the Westway, how you sort of became an activist in the area via your art. And
that's a long story.
Okay, sorry.
Just briefly, I was living in this area in 1960-62, and before I said that, I applied for a job here in 1957 as a projectionist. I wouldn't like to say how old I am, but anyway, I did, and it didn't fit in with what I was doing, and so I said no. Right, 1960 to 62, I lived in this neighbourhood, and then I went to New York for 4 years, and I worked as an economist and then as a photographer. I just took it up suddenly, and then I came back to London and I photographed Velvet Underground's first performances and several other performances that they did in New York for Andy Warhol. And but the first pictures were before Andy Warhol got involved with them. I came back to London, and I was living in this area, and they were about to start building Westway, and I got very involved in proposing a scheme for an adventure playground in the first bit, under the first bit in Acklam Road, and then later we increased the area we were trying to get to 23 acres, which became what's Westway now, and was finally accepted. It took 3 years of continuous work to get them to accept it, but that was a bit of community activism locally. Filming, I was a photographer in New York part of the time, and I came back, and then we ran playgrounds under the motorway before it was finished, and in other places too, and those are the photographs you were talking about, and I think I'm going to try and get an exhibition of them because there's some nice pictures. All my negatives are destroyed because they were at a lab, and I went away for a while, and when I came back they were gone bankrupt, and the lab, and they just chucked all my 15 years of work onto the street and or junked it. So I need to Constantine found some of my pictures of the kids playing, which are my best pictures of all, I think, by a long way. I love them. And then I also was photographing Pink Floyd at UFO and Roundhouse. So I think that's probably enough.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll just have a quick word with JB, Jonathan Barnett. Perhaps you tell us a little bit about the Portobello Film Festival, because this is part of the Portobello Film Festival. Perhaps some of the people here are not aware of it, because it's right here. It's in the north of the borough, and it's been going for many years. And yeah.
Yeah, well, we started in 1996. It was started by Barney Platts Mills, who made an amazing film called Bronco Bullfrog. And we decided right at the beginning that we weren't going to charge admission for it, and we were going to try and show as many films as possible that were submitted. And that's it, basically, and that's what we've been doing for 24 years. And it's a free festival, so it kind of depends on local people kind of wanting to let us use the place for nothing, like the wonderful Gate Cinema. And you know, we had Guy Ritchie's first film, we had Sarah Gavron's first film, we had Shane Meadows. So a lot of people have passed through us, but the idea is it's just a platform for new filmmakers to show their films, and most of them are short. And I suppose the whole thing really comes out of this whole thing that's come out today, which is this kind of counter-cultural spirit of this area. We're definitely North Kensington, we're not Chelsea or anything like that. And you know, I mean, it's amazing what has come out of this area. You know, Pink Floyd, The Clash, Michael Horowitz. You know, it's a lot of the greatest art in this country has come from around here, and it's all come from a kind of counter-cultural perspective, and hopefully that's the perspective that the festival presents.
Thank you very much, JB. I'd like to invite any questions from the audience.
Can you tell me how you can still run a free film festival, and how tight it is and how hard it is to get funded?
Yeah, no, it's very difficult to get funding. I mean, obviously, it's a free festival, so it doesn't particularly appeal to your average corporate sponsor who wants to make loads of money. But you know, the council have been good to us, and the Westway Trust have been good to us, and we don't get very much. I mean, this year's whole festival, which lasts for 18 days, and there's about 30 different shows, is being done on £10,000. So if anybody ever does see this film or anything, you know, if they want to come and give us some more money, they'd be very welcome.
And can you also tell me if you would like to encourage youngsters for the area to get involved with the film festival, especially ones that are running about with guns and knives? Would you like to get them off the streets and make films?
Yeah, no, it'd be great if they did. I mean, that's how we started. We have this thing called Massive Videos that was being run by this Barney Platts Mills, and the whole idea for that was that it was for something for kids off the street to make films rather than going around causing trouble.
I also, the very end person, I can't remember your name, because I'm hopeless with names, yeah. I also lost all my film, all my negatives and everything else in the fire last year. So I know how you feel, and I know how gutted you are. Just to let you know.
Gutted? I'm not, actually. Life goes on, you do something different. I've been doing other things. I've got allotments. We never stop working on our allotments now. So everything's fine.
I was totally gutted. I was like losing a little baby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to ask Adam about the soundtrack to his film, whether that was original or whether it's been dubbed over. I mean, it's really good.
Oh, thank you very much. The soundtrack, I left America in 1966 and came back to New York, came back to London and left the film and the film stock shot and everything, but left it with Yvette, who did the whole editing and soundtrack, and the sound engineer gave us that music. I don't know, it's wonderful music. I really like the music. Did anyone remember that? Did anyone notice the music? Yeah. It was terrific music. It goes on in my brain all the time. And just gave it to us, which is part of the wonderful pleasure of free things, of festivals, but it's also sound engineers giving away free music. It's wonderful. Soundtrack, she just edited it, and then sent me sent me some sort of copy at the end of it, not very good quality, and had the original film stock, which turned out to be this stuff that gets dangerous after a long time in a tin, and spontaneously combusts, I think it does. Is that what happens? Something like that. And so it's a big problem for film archives, is that they have to recopy and renew the thing on stock that doesn't burn. And she copied it, but very badly, which is why it was such a rubbish print. It was helped quite a lot by Constantine increasing the contrast, but originally it was quite a high contrast, sharp, clear film, and a big shame that it never survived, a bit like my negatives. But I've got some prints left of those pictures, so I can copy those, but negatives go. And this film now has got about 1/10 of the amount of information on the film that it had originally, so it's quite a damaged thing. And the sound was not too good either. It's what happens.
What happened to the original? What happened to the original was the question. Sorry, who asked that question?
The original's thrown away because it's dangerous.
But it could be transferred digitally by specialists. I mean, specialists could transfer. It's a nitrate film, I take it.
Anything could have happened, but what actually happened is she copied it probably with a camera using VHS and then translated it into something else. It was translated about 3 times to save it, and the result was a CD with 1 gigabyte of information on it, and that's nothing compared to the amount of information in the original film. So it's hopeless, it's gone.
But the film itself still exists?
No, of course not, because it's spontaneously combustible, so it's a fire hazard and has to be destroyed before it bursts into flames. You can't keep things forever.
But it hasn't spontaneously combusted as yet.
No. What I'm saying is that the film was made in 1965. By 1995, it was a public danger. It was like a bomb. It's going to burst into flames. So you can't keep it. You have to try and copy it, and she didn't do too well on the copying. And then it has to be destroyed. It has to be got rid of because it's dangerous. You do get that, do you?
Yes, I understand.
Right.
I mean, I know quite a lot about archive film and specialists who deal with archive film, nitrates film particularly. I mean, it's obviously requires very specialist handling, but it is possible to do this.
It is at the time, but that's 1995 and not now. So the film just had to be destroyed, I think. Well, that's what she was told.
Okay, so it's no longer with us.
No, it's completely gone. Yeah.
I see. It's great to come to the Gate Theatre, which I haven't been to for quite a while. It's wonderful architecture and great to see independent film being screened. Is that something which is going to be taken on more? Because that would be great to see, more independent film and sort of being screened within what is a mainstream film programme.
It is quite difficult. The ethos of Picture House is to be a community-based cinema, probably more so than some other chains maybe. Over the years it looks like the Gate in particular has probably neglected that a little bit. I've certainly had a little bit of experience in my career trying to encourage that within whatever venue that I'm at, hence why we're doing what we're doing today. Picture House as a company, they just have their own distribution arm, as in within the last sort of 12 to 18 months. And that will be looking, as far as I know, at certain independent films and then potentially looking to distribute that throughout the network. As far as sort of literally independent screenings go, it can depend on cinema by cinema. Picture House is quite a good company for that, as they will give a venue manager a little bit of independence as far as being able to kind of do stuff with the venue. It is quite difficult. The Gate in particular is very difficult because it's a single screen cinema. Some of the other venues have 3 or 4 cinemas and various different sizes, so they can put on their mainstream films throughout the week, and then they can maybe do something with their smaller screen. Here that's not so possible, especially now with the distributor contracts. Some of the films we get in, we are just locked in, There's nothing we can do. We've got to show the same film time after time for that 1 week, and there's not an awful lot we can do about it. But when the opportunity arises with, certain circumstances, it's definitely, the company itself will definitely look at that, and cinema managers independently will also do that.
That's great news. I wondered whether shorts was something that, because that's obviously something that used to happen years ago, you would get shorts and as part of a programme, whether that would be something that would be of interest. I mean, it's great to see here that the Picture House is taking that on board. I mean, I used to live near Brixton, and the Ritchie obviously is a very important part of cultural life in Brixton, so, that's just a question whether thought that.
Yeah, if you definitely have anything, or you're part of, I know there's a lot of short film festivals that do actually do little tours. I believe that if you present something to Picture House as a whole, or again to a cinema, it's definitely something that we'll look at. I can't guarantee that they'll be successful in that, but it won't be brushed aside straight away.
Sure thing. It's great to hear that you're open to it.
What they used to do was to have Pathé News and a cartoon or something or other like that. Nowadays, there's only adverts as the short film to start with. I don't know anybody who does anything different. Everybody's doing ads.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an idea. One of the ideas for us getting involved with the festival was actually to do something with the short films. That was one of the original ideas we were looking at, that we would take all the shorts from the festival and we would put them in between the segments of the films. Or here, when I took over, the turnaround times for the screens were only 10 minutes. I've actually tripled that to half an hour just to make the flow of people coming in and out of the screen a lot better. But there's certainly potential there before our main programmes to do stuff like that. Obviously, that needs to go through about 10 people higher up the food chain than me before we did anything like that. But it's certainly a possibility that we were certainly looking at for this.
Good. That's great, thank you. Thanks very much, everybody. I'm going to say thank you very much for coming up today. Thank you very much.